Red vs. Blue Season 16 Episode 7 It Just Winked at Me has officially released, so let me break it down for you. So after having just been smited by Atlas, Tucker and Sister survived it as they are under the protection of him. Atlas described the protection as being incapable of passing his firewall, a pretty direct and in-your-face line that you would assume they want us thinking of AIs. Church should be out of the question, let's just get that out of the way real quick. If you think Church should come back, think again. He was given a heartfelt, conclusive goodbye, and it should not be tarnished in any way. As for what AI it could possibly be, there are a few AIs still out and about that we know by name, but if I were to take a gamble at it, I would wager either Vic or potentially Andy as well. Andy had a very prevalent role in Crunch Bite's adventure. He's dealt with aliens before, and he supposedly died in the explosion, but as we later learned, literally no one died in the explosion. But Vic would be who, if it is an AI and not just a red herring of a line. Vic seems like the logical answer. He was in the machine that affected Donut, and that's really all to go on. Plus, he and O'Malley were a strong team. O'Malley did say if he ever conquered the universe, he would crush every living soul to dust, except Vic. He would be Assistant Crusher.
Then the universe remains, and I'll crush every living soul into dust. Except for you, of course, Vic. I'll make you Assistant Crusher.
So O'Malley's goal to take over or destroy the universe, so that plan may really be coming to fruition, which is actually kind of funny if that's what they're doing. But anyway, if it is an AI blocking Atlas, I'd wager Vic. A lot of things seem to be wrapping back around to the arc they went on at Blood Gulch, and he had a very prominent one as well as O'Malley. Having nothing to do with what happened at Blood Gulch, Atlas summons a Cyclops. Gus. A Gusclops. Yeah, that's the thing that happened. With no real ability to commentate on the fight itself, Tucker manages to uppercut him right in his ball, which, I might add, does not make sense despite what Tucker and Sister say. Why does having one ball make sense for a Cyclops? He's still got 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 ears, 2 nostrils. What makes his eyes so connected to his ball sack anyway? So, yeah, point me. There was also a moment where Sister attempts to use Tucker's sword only for Tucker to say that it only works for him. I bring this up only because it seems like a bit of foreshadowing. Like perhaps later in the season or next season, someone other than Tucker is going to use his sword. Nothing really to say about it, just wanted to bring it up. So because of the Cyclops' defeat, Atlas brings in his wife, to which both Tucker and Sister nope right out of there and into the Knights era. In terms of what else happened, Huggins makes an attempt to befriend Griff so they can figure out a way to exit the past. This does not go well, and that is all that happened with them. Now, this episode definitely getting a lot of mixed reactions. Either it's the worst thing you've ever seen, or it's the most hysterical thing you've ever seen in your entire life. Let's first start off by talking about the good of it. To this episode's credit, it felt the longest of any of the other ones so far, which I guess is good because it's almost the shortest one so far. Also, for having green screened an entire human into it, it actually worked a lot better in execution than what you'd expect in concept. I was surprised as to how well everything turned out. Unfortunately, that's about where the good really ends there with the green screen. The problem, a living human was green screened into the show. Something that I've recently come to realize with this season as to why it's felt so uncomfortable for me so far is this lack of restriction. It's like there's too much creative freedom to do anything. Like the charm that Red vs. Blue has had for so long was the fact that they were limited. Here are the character models, here's the maps, here's the weapons, let's make a story. They were confined into the world that was in-game. When Monty came aboard, that changed, but they never went anywhere wild with it. Here's a few locations that we need things to take place at, but mainly it was used for fight scenes. The Chorus trilogy did the same thing, many CGI fights and an environment here and there. But it seems as though this season has become a kid in a candy shop and said, we can do anything. There's nothing stopping us. We have a team, so let's do it. And then they did it. There's this giant disconnect that it no longer feels like the show's working with what it's given. Now it's like, we can green screen a human. We can CGI an entire different era of time. It's no longer making each of the maps feel like it's one big world. That's been one of the biggest charms the show's had. Like how the caves are under Blood Gulch. Of course it's not, they're 2 completely different maps, but they were woven together to make it feel like it was a thing. Same goes for the simulation room under Valhalla. You get this sense of where things are, you know which direction the characters go to reach a location. But when you CG Italy and a castle, There's no sense of building blocks, it's just, here are locations and things are taking place there now. The writers have finally decided to break down the walls that kept everything nice and conformed, and I think that's why this season has felt so awkward and different compared to the past ones. Even last season did a decent job at using the maps and building this sense of area, but this season's just been time travel we're here, time travel we're there, new location, next set. Something else that I specifically noticed this episode is how Joe likes to write things and tell jokes. You see, Bernie in the Blood Gulch Chronicles used comedy through negging one another. They were so personality driven and everyone would just make fun of and mock each other, and that's where all the comedy was. When Miles came along, the way he goes about things was different. He attempted to keep the comedy there with everyone's personalities and they continued to mock each other. But Miles is more of a story guy. The Chorus trilogy definitely had comedy in it, but I would consider it a plot-driven arc. Miles is more about telling a story. Joe's way of going about things seems completely different on all fronts. Joe has had a very meta-style sense of humor, very self-referential, and he likes to make fun of how stories are told. He's a writer himself, so he knows the path, the directions, he knows the outline that's supposed to be followed, and he jokes on that. That sense of comedy is something completely different to Red vs. Blue. It's why Jax was such a disliked character in season 15. He was the catalyst to all those jokes, all those pop culture references. Jax was the character who was in a constant state of knowing where the story was going, and people hated that. That's why Jax wasn't a liked character. Now, all of a sudden, this season Jax makes a reappearance and people like him. Why? It's because Joe got rid of all those self-referential jokes and he gave Jax a personality of his own, and it got a positive response. I said I noticed how Joe tells comedy in this episode because of Sister. Joe didn't get rid of all the tropey jokes of how stories are told, he just moved them to different characters. Sister talked about the trope of thinking someone was dead, but they're still alive. Griff earlier this season talked about incendiary incidents. Joe didn't get rid of all those jokes, he just moved them off of Jax. It's why the comedy isn't landing with a lot of people. Any character can say a joke, but that doesn't make it funny. If I were to show people the text of what Sister said and asked, which character said this, I can guarantee you almost no one would say Sister. It's not her character to say that type of thing. It would have been Jax's, but considering he's no longer part of the story, he needs some other character to say these jokes. It's like how Bernie used to say how he liked to pretend that Caboose was the only one who knew he was inside of a video game. Now, it's like everyone knows that they're inside of a game with how self-referential everything is. It's not a bad sense of comedy, it's just not what Red vs. Blue has been doing for the past 13 years. It's removed the borders that kept them confined, and now they're making decisions to do things like add live action to the show. You've got a new writer whose sense of comedy is clearly different to what it was prior, and those things are what I think has been making this season feel very awkward for people and me personally. It's not that I've been disliking this season so far, but it's all just felt a bit off. Even last season, it had the confinements, and I thought it had a lot of good ideas, but mainly just dropped the ball when it came to executing on the concepts. This season is unhinged, and we don't know if it's going to do well because of it. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for this video. So for now, be sure to like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you're interested in more content like this, consider becoming a sponsor over on Patreon. You get all the content early, and it really does help out the channel. Be sure to follow me on all social medias, and I'll see you in the next video.